sir. What is the liability of a shipping company, and maybe Mr. Fowler would be appropriate, I'm not sure who would be the right person, right now when there's a disaster like such as happened in Baltimore? Are there limits on liability in statute?
Thank you for your question. I appreciate that. I'd like to follow up with you after about the specifics, and I can get our staff involved to make sure that we're providing you the adequate results on that.
Well, my staff can do that for me afterwards. But for right now, tell me what your liability is.
So our liability would be to respond, and so we have contracts in place that would ensure that in the event that we would respond accordingly. Take, for example, in this particular instance you're referring to in Baltimore, they had salvage contracts and responding contracts already in place, so that immediately in hours after those salvage responders were immediately responding to that incident. I know that because we were in communication with some of our services to offer our services and support to do that. So that there is what's going on in Baltimore is a joint effort, and beyond there's ship owner plays a part, but absolutely we would have the responsibility to respond and would do that proactively.
How about, I mean, I thought I read there were damages, and there was a limitation on damages because of some old statute. If this shipping company was negligent, what's the liability?
Thank you again, Congressman. I'll come back with some more details, the specifics of that.
All right. Well, I'll find out from my staff. But what I'm getting at is there's liability, could be liability on the companies, and there shouldn't be limitations that are on some ancient law. The limitations, if there are any at all, they ought to be current. But we shouldn't give a free pass to the maritime industry if they are negligent in causing a damage to a bridge or other facility that causes an injury to a port, which causes an economic injury to the community. So we'll look into that. Is there any particular port, Mr. Wong, in your opinion, that's more vulnerable than another right now?
Thank you for your question, Congressman. I think, as the Coast Guard alluded to this morning, they do risk assessments with ports every single day. Our port here in Miami is vulnerable as well. We continuously train, we drill for response and active mitigation for what we can't control. But to answer your question more precisely, I do think every port has specific critical infrastructure that will hinder their operations. Here at Port Miami, we're a 522-acre island. We have 2 points of access through our bridge, which is critical, and through our tunnel, which is another critical infrastructure. But as far as our waterways, we have one single inbound and outbound channel. It is not a two-way channel. So when a parade of vessels are going in, they're going in. When a parade of vessels going out, it's singled out. We recently, last November, had an issue where we had a downed recreational vessel strike a barge. She did go down in the channel. There was one fatality in the channel. The response was we had 5 cruise vessels cutting water, standing by to come in. We had thousands of passengers coming inbound, thousands of passengers on hold on the outbound, and 3 container vessels as well. So when you talk about planning, mitigation, Coast Guard, our local sheriffs, our community here, as port stakeholders, we drill, we take it very seriously to react as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Wong.
Yes, sir.
Mr. McCarthy, you mentioned safety as being a paramount to port operations, which of course they are. Based on what you know so far, could have anything been done differently with the Francis Scott Key Bridge? I read a lot about some kind of supports they could have put around the pylons, and that would have diffused the impact. Could that have happened? And
I'm not privy to the details of the Francis Scott Key Bridge. I can talk about what's going on in Georgia. Around the Sidney Lanier Bridge, which is down in Brunswick, Georgia, there are actually 2-acre rock walls around the abutment of the bridge to protect the stanchions of the bridge down in Sidney Lanier Bridge down in Brunswick.
Were they constructed at the time of when the bridge was constructed, or were they added later?
I'll have to get back to you on the details of that question.
Do you know how old that bridge is, approximately?
I do not. I'll have to get back to you on that as well.
Because that was an issue about, I think they said they could have gone back in Baltimore and reinforced those stanchions, but it hadn't been done. Do you know of situations, anybody on the panel know of situations where folks have gone back and fortified the stanchions to guard against a potential strike?
I am not.
I think Tampa, the incident in 1980,
Yeah.
they actually did. But there are other cases, I'm sure, that just not in the top of my mind right now.
There was something that happened in New Orleans some years ago. I'm not quite sure what it was. A friend of mine was an NTSB back in the 90s, and he said after that there was a need for major study, and it was mandated by Congress, and it never took place. Can you edify us on that, Mr. Sadler?
I'm not surprised. I'm not familiar with the specifics of that, but I'm not surprised that other issues, other priorities at the time intervened to make it not possible, too expensive, not urgent.
Thank each of you for what you do, and thank you, Mr. Wong, for being the first person to recognize me today. Appreciate that very much. I yield back the balance of my time.